This is the game that I have created called Into the Dungeon. Into the Dungeon is a 2D platformer dungeon crawler in which the main objective is to get to the end of the dungeon whilst collecting items to sell for profit. For this game I have created two levels, one which handles the startup menu and one which handles the game world. The startup menu consists of the start option, quitting the game, as well as the controls which can be displayed to the player. In the game world, the player will believe that there are two different levels. However, these are actually located in the same world inside Unreal Engine 4. I have managed it like this because when changing levels, certain variable values were being reset. This would mean that the variables would have to be managed in an external blueprint. To get around this, I decided to put both levels within the same game world. This would mean the variables would not be reset. Since this is a 2D platformer, the resources needed are very small, meaning that this creates no impact on the gameplay. To create the visual aspect of the game, I have used two tile maps. The first tile map is used for the home base, and the second for the dungeon. The tile maps only include blocks which I use to collide with the player, including floors and walls. This is so that it is easier to manage all interactable objects. As standard within 2D platformers, I have added health, ammo, and mana pickups, as well as special treasures that can be collected by the player in order to exchange for gold. I've added these throughout the levels in order for the player to be able to pick up various items as well as be able to get through the level with more ease. I have added the ability for the player to be able to slam the ground, similar to the Mario style games. This means that the player can control their movement with a lot more precision than normal. I've also added the ability to double jump as well as wall jump within the game. This allows the player to think of their own ways of navigating the map. As well as this, I've also added the ability to be able to climb and climb down ladders. I have also added a series of flipbooks to handle animations, which use an animation state machine in order to decide what flipbook to display. These flipbooks include idle, running, and jumping. The same animation is also used for falling. Here is the animation state machine that I have used. You can see that it prioritizes falling, and then running, and then finally the idle state, after which it selects a flipbook and then passes it through to the player. I have also added multiple weapons into the game, which can be cycled through by the player. These weapons also have different stats, so are more effective against enemies. These weapons are not unlocked from the start. The player would have to go through the dungeon, collect the treasures, and take them back and sell them in order to earn money. They can then come to these shops to purchase their new weapons. Without these weapons unlocked, they will not be able to equip them. Besides from the health potions, mana potions, ammo pickups and the ladders, I've also added two more interactable items. First of all is this moving block and lever system. By overlapping the lever, the moving block will move across. This can only be activated from one side. As well as this, I have added a trampoline style item which has to be used to escape from the dungeon. By jumping on top of this, you'll be fired towards the exit. However, you have to be careful, as sometimes you may miss. To escape the level, the player simply has to walk up to the door and press E. I have also added an interactable NPC. Whilst there is only a single NPC in the game, my NPC does inherit from an NPC class, which means that in the future I can also add multiple more NPCs with ease. To begin chatting with the NPC, the player can walk over to them and press the interact key. This will start a dialogue with the NPC. Once the NPC is finished speaking, the player will have a choice of what they would like to select. They can either leave the chat or progress with the dialogue. There are multiple choices that the player can make, each would influence the NPC's speech. Once the player has progressed through the dialogue once, they can interact with the NPC again, and the NPC will have different dialogue quotes, depending on what items the player has. I also added enemies into my game. Similar to my NPC, I created an enemy class which would hold all common nodes. I then created my separate enemies, which would only hold their health as well as their different sprites. I have coded my enemies so they will only follow the player if they are within a certain distance from them. This means that they will not accidentally walk off the edges if the player has just spawned on one side of the map. They will also jump over one-block obstacles, however I have coded them so that they will not jump to avoid edges. This is so that if the player is out of ammo or mana, then they can just lure them into the lava to kill them. I have also added background music to my game. I would have also added sounds for all events, however I could not due to time constraints and chose to focus on more important features of the game. Whilst most games have a dead zone in order to kill the player if they go below a certain height, I have chosen to add my own variant of this. I've added lava in which if the player stands, they will slowly come to their death. I have used various widgets as part of my HUD. This allowed me to control the game rather than having to use input into the game world. My first example of this is the main menu. This is actually in an empty level and uses the HUD as an interactivity system. On here we have 3 buttons, all which can be interacted. Obviously to quit, you can open a different widget which shows the controls to the game, or you can start the game. Within the game world, I have a separate HUD widget which shows the player's health, mana and ammo, as well as the current magic and weapon that they are using. This is always updated, ensuring that it shows the correct information. You can also open the player stats by pressing C. However, this only simply shows the gold, as I have not added a stat system into this game. As well as this, you can also open a pause menu by pressing P. This will pause the game and allow you to either remind yourself of the controls, resume the game, or you can even quit the game from this menu. With all the widgets that I have added, I have also added anchoring onto these widgets. This means that if the screen is rescaled, then these should still appear in the correct places. If I did not add these, then these could be moved into different parts of the screen, possibly which would not even show up on the player's viewport.